actually the first African-American in Philadelphia to be hired by a Fortune 500 company at that time. So my dad broke the color line in Philadelphia for corporate America. And during that mid-60s period, the color line was being broken all across the country in various corporations. It was the emergence, after World War II, there was the emergence of the Black middle class. And, Black people were fighting for civil rights and inclusion. And it was just a time when corporate America was starting to recognize that the Black community needed to be more involved on all levels. So my dad and others like him were trailblazers when they broke those color lines and broke into corporate America. And they represented the first generation of Black professionals in the country. We grew up in a time coming after them, the next generation after them, where we kind of took being, working for corporate America as a legitimate opportunity for us. Mm-hmm. And we almost took for granted the fact that we could come out of college and work, for corporate America. I mean, that was part of our assimilation. Sure. But we have to realize that people came before us, and the generation before us certainly opened that door. Mm-hmm. So around the year 2000, I had the opportunity to start the Black Professionals News. I was very interested and very focused at that time on connecting the Black business community and the Black professional community to create a platform for them to connect, interact, and exchange products and services. Many of our Black professionals are business owners themselves. If you look at doctors and dentists and lawyers, architects, engineers, a lot of them own their own businesses, okay? A doctor has his own medical practice. And we tend to think of them as a professional service provider, which they are, but they're also a business owner, mm-hmm. Okay? So, there's an opportunity there for the business community to do business with each other. And I wanted to create a newspaper that facilitated that exchange. And, we've been going on now almost 20 years, like you said. And our original customer base was Black-owned businesses. So at one point we were wholly supported by advertising from Black-owned businesses. People say we don't support each other, and Black people, we have all these challenges when it comes to doing business with each other. But, I hadn't found that when I started my newspaper. The community was very receptive to the kind of information I had in my paper. I purposely didn't style my newspaper for general news, meaning that I didn't cover regular news stories like robbery and murder and things that we see on the TV news. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to add another publication or another media outlet into the market that focused on that. So I wanted to change the direction of my newspaper, and I focused on information. Mm-hmm. But because information is not time sensitive, okay? I wanted to create something of value that people would hold on to. And ironically enough, over the years, Rob, I would run into people who had gotten my newspaper like years ago, years before I even interacted with them or met them. And they would find out who I was and what I did. And they would say, oh yeah, I picked up a copy of your paper. Mm-hmm. I said, oh, that's nice. Where'd you get it? I was at a church event, or I was at a reception, or I was at a meeting, and I got a copy of your paper. I said, oh, that's great. Mm-hmm. Have you got one lately? They said, well, I haven't gotten one in a couple of years, but I still have the one I picked up 2 years ago.
Hey, let me ask you,
yes, sir.
Was there a model that you drew from, or kind of, helped influence how you wanted to style yours, or how you wanted to?
Absolutely. The highest honor, that I could bestow upon my paper is I wanted to be the Black enterprise of Philadelphia. Right. Okay. Mm-hmm. I saw that market as a market that had value. Okay. Mm-hmm. You're talking to people who have high income and high education, very high achievers. And that's the target that I wanted to approach with my newspaper. Okay. There was a void in Philadelphia at that time for business publications. Certainly we had Black-owned newspapers like the Tribune and the Sun, and there were other publications, the New Observer, other publications on the market, but none of them focused specifically on business. So that's that's the route that I chose to take.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, so you mentioned your father a little bit as you were talking. Why don't you, I know I saw a post on Facebook a couple of weeks ago, I think you were talking about him. Why don't you share a little bit about his, his impact?
Sure. My dad started his career as
Ernest?
my dad, I'm sorry, Ernest Harvey.
Yeah.
Ernest Harvey Sr.
Mm-hmm.
And his professional career started as a school teacher in the Philadelphia School District.
Mm-hmm.
He started his college education at Virginia State College, and he matriculated from there to Temple University.
Mm-hmm.
He attained his master's degree in education. And he was a assistant principal at Vaux Junior High School for many
Mm-hmm.
years
Mm-hmm.
before he entered corporate America. And he told me at the time, when he was passing, when at the end of his life, we shared a lot of his history.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked a lot about his past and a lot about, his aspirations and how he viewed his life and, what he wanted his legacy to be. And he also told me at that time that he was being considered, prior to joining Sunoco, he was being groomed to be the first Black superintendent of schools for the city of Philadelphia. So those of us who understand, how these wheels turn, we know that none of this stuff happens in a vacuum, okay? If you look at how Jackie Robinson was groomed to enter professional baseball, it wasn't because he was the best player. They thought he would be able to actually, achieve that milestone and survive in that environment.
Mm-hmm.
So they thought he had the temperament to break into the major leagues.
Mm-hmm.
So that took a process. It
Mm-hmm.
took a process for the Negro Leagues to prepare him for that. It took a process for the ownership of the baseball teams. Okay.
We've got about a minute left for this segment. Okay.
To groom him in that position. And that's kind of the position that my dad was in. He was surrounded by very supportive people, and they identified him as having the temperament to be able to handle the challenges of entering corporate America, because at that time you're still dealing with systemic racism.
Mm-hmm.
And no doubt he had to deal with that when he got in the office at Sunoco. We all know being the first of anything is not easy, but he was able to make that transition, and he opened doors for other people to come behind him.
That's great. On that note, we're going to take a break and come back and discuss some other things, okay?
Thank you, Rob.
All right.